Welcome to this episode of the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. I'm Jess, sales coach and leadership expert, and I am really excited to dig down into today's episode. Okay guys, you are going to be super excited because I have waxed lyrical about this man since I met him and saw his phenomenal keynote talk at Upreneur Summit. I feel like my mind has been a little bit blown since the summit. I've actually been putting in a lot of work all into the topic that we are going to be talking about today. So please join me in welcoming the amazing Baer to Smart Leaders Sell podcast. Welcome.
Fantastic to be here, Jessica. I really appreciate the opportunity. So good to meet you at Upreneur. I can't believe it was only 2 weeks ago. It feels like about 2 years ago. There's so much has happened.
I feel like we're working in dog years. It must have been at least 7 by now.
It must have been.
Phenomenal. So I obviously saw your talk at Upreneur, and I and the majority of my community who was there were absolutely blown away because so many people teach marketing in the same way now. You know, there's a simple one-step formula, it seems, for pretty much everything on the internet at the moment. And you stood out for me because I've obviously read books from you before, Utility, Hug Your Haters, that kind of thing. But seeing you on stage was almost a completely different experience because what you were talking about was this idea of marketing in a way that your customers actually do the hard work for you.
Yeah.
And for me, that was this completely new idea in the online space because that's not something that we focus on. We talk about paid traffic and Facebook ads. So before we dive into the mind-blowing sheer awesome that talk triggers are, tell everybody a little bit about what you actually do. What's the real world title?
Yeah, so I am the founder of Convince and Convert. We are a strategy consulting firm that works with many of the world's most iconic brands on content strategy, social media strategy, digital strategy, customer experience strategy. We're a virtual firm. We've got people all over the US and some outside the US. We also have a media division, so we've got a large network of podcasts, blogs, video programs, webinars, training programs, things along those lines. Instead of selling that information to students as a course or a mastermind, most of our work is free to the student, but is underwritten by sponsors. So we work with a number of different marketing and advertising technology companies to sponsor and underwrite our content. And then, of course, I spend a lot of my time personally traveling around, giving presentations, writing books, etc. We do have some online courses. We have 2 currently now and 2 more under development. So we do some of that kind of work, but we're certainly not information marketer specialists. We're much more on the consulting side.
And I think that's really interesting because, you know, the one thing that I'm forever saying to my audience is that the skills they learn in the real world are eminently applicable when they come online, when they start their, you know, consulting business or their coaching business or service-based. And yet one of the things that we tend to walk away from, as soon as people walk away from their, quote, real world jobs, they go, I don't want to look at any of that stuff anymore. And that isn't relevant to me. And I'm going to find some completely new and innovative way of marketing. But that wasn't what you were talking about on stage. And for me, that was so interesting to see somebody really put it into practice.
Well, look, I read a lot of the same things that you and your community reads and listen to a lot of the same people and know a lot of the same experts who have a system for converting cold traffic into hot customers for your tripwire, which then nurtures them into your introductory course, which then nurtures some of those into your more expensive course, which then nurtures some of those in your mastermind, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if every single person that is at the top of your funnel, you have to somehow pay to get them in that funnel, that puts a little bit of a cap on what you can actually accomplish. You know, I've been doing this for 30 years now. And literally for the first 29 of those years, I never tried to get a customer. I started 5 multi-million-dollar companies from scratch and never actually tried to get a customer on purpose. It was all word of mouth. It was all storytelling. It was all over-delivering on people's expectations. And I feel like we are setting that aside a little bit right now at our own peril, thinking that, well, all we got to do is get really good at Facebook ads, and then we don't need to worry about anything else. And like, well, A, that's not really true. And B, all Facebook has to do is decide to triple the cost of clicks, and all of a sudden you no longer have a business. So my philosophy is the best way to grow any company, literally any company, online, offline, big, small, B2B, B2C, coaching, refuse collection, it doesn't matter, is for the customers to grow the business for you. to give them an experience that they don't expect, to the degree that they actually go out of their way to tell their friends about you. Now, this has been around literally since cavemen, right? Like word of mouth has been around since the first day, right? But somehow we kind of decided to go to sleep on it in favor of more advanced analytical digital marketing strategies. And I'm here to tell you that both are important.
So I really love this because I remember way back when I was 16, I got my first job, and I got my first job in a jewelry shop because I was crap at making coffee. I'm the only person in the world who can make cold coffee using a coffee machine. It's an underrated skill, all right? But I started working for one of the world's largest jewelry firms. I was really, really fortunate, found my feet, and they had been set up because the guy who owned them in the UK previously, they used to be under the brand of Ratner's, he totaled his entire business by going out there one day and saying, yeah, what we sell is crap. But his exact words. And his entire business imploded. And this American company was able to come in, and they were able to buy the company at a massive, massive discount and build it back up. So that word of mouth is super important in terms of building, but also in terms of destroying. Reputation is huge in the market.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that we don't spend enough time on in the information products business, is thinking about, partially because there's not really a nifty mechanism for it, right? There's not a Yelp for courses, so there's not a TripAdvisor, but there should be. I've actually been talking about that for like 3 years with different people, like starting that business. There really should be that kind of consumer reviews platform. And I think part of the thing that actually, this is sad to say, but I think it's very true, that helps information product and service purveyors get away with mediocre experiences is that if you're a student and you have taken the 1,499 pound course and you realize that, oh, this course actually sucks and I didn't learn anything, you're not going to tell that story to a lot of people because you look stupid, because you took the wrong course from the wrong person. Even though it wasn't your fault, when you tell that story, it makes you look like you're not a very discerning customer. And so people tend to not tell that story. They just sort of chalk it up to a bad experience and like, well, that was a waste of money. And I think a lot of information, folks kind of live on that fear of students to describe that it really wasn't a great experience.
I think that's massively true. I think the other thing is the shaming. If people feel like if they come out and say, I had a bad experience with a course or a program or a service, they're going to get done for slander. And I mean, I've watched Twitter. I've watched some of the complaints that go out to Twitter. And I think it is a real shame that in the internet marketing and the online education industry, people don't feel like they can say, I didn't have a great experience, and be confident in getting a decent customer service response. Instead, very emotional, and people can take it really personally and end up having really serious consequences for a student who didn't get what they paid for.
Yeah, I mean, my daughter's at university, and they are encouraged to rate and review every professor for every course, right? And there's actually a book that they get that rates and reviews every professor, and this is a school, right? And that's how it should be for everybody, but we just haven't quite gotten there yet on the online education side.
100%. Well, if you ever start the business, let us know. We'll
all right, I'll let you know. Yes. It's on my list of things to work on.
Along with the many other thousands. So in terms of this, now we understand, obviously, the market is driven by word of mouth. If you have a great experience, you'll typically tell 1 or 2 people. If you have a terrible experience, you'll go out and tell 10. Those are just the stats that it comes with, unfortunately, as people. Like you say, we like to tell stories. We like to socialize and share experiences. So your new work, I say new work, but it's not really new for you, but Talk Triggers itself, that's what this demonstrates, is this idea of how can we be better organic marketers? How can we do things and create experiences that mean that our customers stay longer and increase the amount of people they talk to about us, right?
That's it. And the challenge for most people in most businesses is they believe that competency creates conversation. That if you are good and you deliver a good value and deliver a good product, that people will tell that story. But that doesn't really happen very often. We don't tell stories about good because that's not a very interesting story. We tell stories about different. So what you want to do is come up with one thing that you will do differently in the operations of your business, whether it's online education or anything else. And that one thing that you do purposefully is engineered and designed to be different than what people expect, And because it's different than they expect, it's more likely that that is the story that they will tell about you and your business to other people. We have to be much more proactive and purposeful. Like right now, word of mouth represents between 50 and 90% of all purchases across all businesses, which is an extraordinary, it's massively important. But nobody has an actual strategy for it. Like nobody has a word of mouth plan. Right? You have a Facebook plan, you've got an Instagram plan, you've got maybe a refund strategy or whatever, but nobody has a word of mouth plan. We just assume that people will talk about us. So what we're trying to do with the Talk Triggers philosophy and the Talk Trigger system is do word of mouth on purpose to say, oh, we are going to engineer this one difference maker, and we're going to do it not just because it's fun or funny, although it may be, but because we want to proactively give people the raw materials to tell a story over and over and over and over. And if they tell that story over and over and over, what it means in the real world is you don't have to spend as much money on Facebook ads or any other kind of customer acquisition because your customers become volunteer marketers.
And this is a huge, because this concept isn't discussed in the online education world. It really isn't. Everyone's like, okay, great, I'm going to pour, $10 into Facebook ads, and if I get 20 back, I'm happy. We're doing the 50% return thing. So I guess the biggest thing that I can liken this to is the kind of viral videos you see going on Facebook, at the moment. There's been one that's going around of a doctor, he's an OBGYN, and when women are in labor, he does this dance with them. He does this tango thing, and it apparently happens. And that's been going viral on Facebook, but that ward, that particular hospital, has had a huge influx of patients wanting to go there because they want this doctor. So that's effectively what you're saying is not necessarily, find something that you think is going to go viral, but find something that's going to be easy for people to talk about and just make the experience different from what they expect.
Absolutely, because there's a saying in business, Jessica, it's not entirely true, but it's true enough. And it says that advertising is a tax paid by the unremarkable. Some of the best companies in the world that have the best word of mouth spend the least on advertising because they don't have to. Their customers are their advertising because the experience is different in some way. For example, if you dance the tango with your OBGYN, you're going to tell all your friends who either recently had a baby or probably likely to have a baby because birds of a feather flock together about this doctor, and that doctor will have to spend no money on advertising ever because the tango becomes the ad. We can all do this. Just because your business is online doesn't mean that you can't create some sort of incredibly effective, what we would call a talk trigger, a word of mouth generator. It's just that we don't. We're like, well, we have the formula to do ads, so therefore we don't have to do something interesting. And I'm telling you, I've been doing this for 30 years. If you think it's going to be as easy next year as it is this year, or as easy 5 years from now as it is this year, trust me when I tell you it's not. Because Facebook, obviously, /Instagram, /Twitter, /LinkedIn, /any other place where you're getting cold traffic, those are public companies. And they have a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, not to you. And there is an economic downturn right around the corner. And the first thing that's going to happen is ad prices are going up. So trust me, please, when I tell you, you've got to find a way to get customers other than paying for them.
So I love this. And this poses an interesting question, I think, because there's this whole idea specifically online, and I think with business in general, where everybody wants to be, quote, disruptive, right? Everyone's like, I'm looking for the thing that's going to make me different. So if we're all working towards having talk triggers, which, we've been working, me and Liz in my team, we've been working on this for 2 weeks now. Right, what can we implement? How can we keep our customer? Yeah. See, there you go, guys. If you're not listening and taking notes, it would be 2 weeks of work and you can't wait to see what we've got coming up. But how do we then stand out, right? Because if everyone's trying to create a talk trigger, surely a lot of people are going to have similar ideas. So then will people worry, what if my talk trigger is the same as somebody else's? Or is it the fact that it comes from their unique business and their unique personality that makes the difference? Yeah,
that's a good question. I would say I wouldn't worry about it being truly unique, like no one's ever thought of that before, because what you need to have the story be told isn't that it's unique, it's that it's different from what your customers expect. So it doesn't have to be a category of one. Like if I got this incredibly high touch customer service from a high-end jewelry store, I might not tell that story because I expected that. But if I got a similar, or even the same experience from a coffee shop, I might tell that story because I don't expect it in that context. So it's not so much about uniqueness, it's about expectations, which is why one of the keys to the talk trigger creation process is to map out your customer journey, so all the touch points that you have with your customers, and then interview your customers and ask them what they expect will happen at each of those points. And what you're doing is mapping expectations on top of your customer journey. When you do that, Jessica, then you know what people expect. And if you know what they expect, you by definition know what they do not expect. And the talk trigger has to be there where they don't expect it. So it doesn't have to be, I've never heard of that in my life. It just has to be, that's really interesting that would happen from Jessica or in this business. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's almost, if you go back to it, it's almost like a car salesman being full of integrity and not kicking tires, right? It's that expectation.
That's right.
You go there and they're actually a really nice person and you can have a good chat and they sell you what you need.
That's right. The brand is now defunct, which perhaps doesn't speak well for the case study, but in the States, probably 20 years ago now, maybe longer than that, there was a brand that was created by General Motors called Saturn. Mm-hmm. And the Saturn car brand tried to really change the nature of the car business insofar as you would go to the dealership and there was no negotiation. The price on the window of the vehicle was the price. It's just like buying, a coffee maker in a store, right? It's like, that's the price. Whereas typically in America, there's a lot of haggling. It's like a Turkish bazaar. It's one of the only places in America. It's weird. It's one of the only places in America that haggling is acceptable is in the new car business, weirdly, or used car business. So Saturn did that. And ultimately the brand didn't make it after a couple of decades, but it wasn't because of the pricing scheme, but some other things. But you want to talk about a story that people would tell. Holy cow. I mean, go to this place and there's no pressure, there's no stress, there's no negotiation. It's just, this is the price. It was incredibly successful. It totally changed the story that was told about the business.
So, I think it's really interesting because obviously if we are moving into this economic dip, which, we inevitably are, we've been through 3 in the last 7 years, something like that. It's important for people to stand out in the right way. Does their talk trigger necessarily have to be something that is costly? Because we've talked here about customer service, we've talked here about those kinds of things, but I think people automatically jump to, oh my god, I'm going to have to implement new tech or do something different in that sense.
Yep. No, not at all. There's 5 different types of talk triggers. Talkable generosity is the one that you see the most, where you're giving somebody something that they didn't expect. And it's the easiest one to strategize, but it's by no means the only kind. So you have talkable empathy, where you're kinder and more human than people expect. You have talkable usefulness, where you're more useful than customers expect you to be. You have talkable responsiveness, where you're quicker. That's one that people who are in online education can absolutely do, right? Somebody emails you email them back in 30 seconds every time, right? And they're like, wow, I can't believe how responsive Jessica is. That's a story that people will tell. And then you have talkable attitude, where you're just a little more interesting or wacky or dynamic or unusual than people anticipate you to be. That's more of an attitude DNA style approach, but all of those can work. And there's examples of each of them, obviously in the book, Talk Triggers. You'll see them all around the world. You just have to kind of pick one that makes sense for you. So it's entirely possible that your talk trigger can be low cost or no cost. But even if there is a cost associated with it, if in exchange you're not spending money on cold traffic all the time, well, then what's your problem, right? I mean, like I used to always tell my clients, like, look, if I know that every dollar you spend with me gets you $2, you don't have a budget. Your budget is how fast can you borrow money.
And that's huge, because technically that is what Facebook ads have been promising people for the last few years. You put this in, you'll get this out, and it becomes that predictable income stream. What you're saying is, well, that's all going to change. So you might as well put your money into something that you can control. I mean, I suppose there's the other side of that is, well, not the other side, but the question there is, for the majority of people who are looking to build their businesses quickly, they're going to be looking at this and going, that sounds hard. Like, that sounds like work and effort.
It is hard. Yeah. It's all those things. It's work, it's effort, and also it takes a while, because you can't rush word of mouth, or you can't make it work faster than it naturally will work, because it's based on the people that you've already come in contact with telling your story.
Mhm.
So if you want more people top of your funnel, you just pay more for ads and reach, you just increase your reach, right?
Mhm.
You can't really do that with word of mouth because it relies on customers telling your story to other customers. So I'm not suggesting that you only do talk triggers. I mean, I buy traffic myself, right? And I wrote a book literally about this, but I'm suggesting that they work in parallel, right? That you say, okay, we've got this initiative to bring people in who don't know anything about us. We have this initiative to take people who have already given me money and convince them to talk about us to somebody else who then wants to give us money, right? So it's a bi-directional program.
So effectively, it's for people who want to build sustainably, who don't want to be beholden to ad costs for the rest of time, if you're wanting to build a longer term strategy.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that happens in online education business is at some point you run out of things to sell people. So instead of saying, okay, I don't have anything to sell this person, that may or may not be true, but what if I could instead convince this person to go recruit some other folks to start at the top of the funnel, right? So it gives you an additional economic benefit from people who have already been part of your program that maybe you haven't thought of in the past.
That's so useful because, again, that then takes you into the customer retention. It's important how important it is to retain your customers and also that repeat buying cycle. That's something we've talked about on the podcast really recently is, what percentage of your customers are sticking with you, what percentage are buying from you and continuing to go out and share that. But what you're saying is it's effectively ramping up that entire process. So you're spending less to acquire the customer client, but then you're actually maximizing the revenue that's coming from them.
Yeah, I mean, retention is certainly a great goal, right? I wrote a whole book about it, Hug Your Haters. Retention is absolutely something that you want to focus on. But the next piece of that is acquisition, right? So if you've got a customer, let's say they buy your introductory program, great. Now they come back and buy the second program. All right, that's a really strong, important signal. That's awesome. But the better scenario is not only do they buy your second program, but they tell 5 friends who all come in and buy the introductory program. This idea of turning customers into volunteer marketers is really important and incredibly cost effective if you can make it work.
I really love that. Thank you so much. Seriously, this has been so interesting. And I just know that
it was a blast.
A lot from it. Guys, I know that Jay is going to talk to you in a second about the books and the stuff that he has and what's going on for him at the moment, where you can go to find out more about him. But from a personal perspective, I've spent the last 2 weeks literally implementing talk triggers into our business. And what I can say is that it has generated in 2 weeks. So we've implemented one talk trigger in 2 weeks that has generated a direct revenue of 15K in 2 weeks.
Nice.
Now, obviously, my audience is maybe slightly larger than some of you who are listening on the podcast and maybe more warm or more receptive at this point. But if I can do it in 2 weeks, there's absolutely no reason why you can't literally grab a copy of the book and do what it says to make sure that your business is being sustainable in 2019, that you're not beholden to Zuckerberg and paying him tons of money for advertising. So there you go.
We're working on the Talk Triggers Mastermind course. So I'm going to call you and have you help me with it because I'm the worst ever at courses. I'm literally terrible. So I need your help. And now that you actually know the system, you will be incredibly, incredibly good at understanding how to make that work. So I'm seriously going to call you.
No, please do. And I will literally sell everybody into it because I think it's phenomenal. Me and Liz
I appreciate that.
Phenomenal behind the scenes working on it.
I appreciate that.
Where can people find you? If they do want to be involved in the Talk Triggers Mastermind that is coming up that I will be selling to them.
Thank you. TalkTriggers.com is the main site for the concept. Obviously, information on the book is there and then tons of free stuff. So I would love it if you bought the book, and I think you'll be well compensated for doing so in terms of its impact on your business. But there's tons of free stuff at TalkTriggers.com. There's infographics, there's videos, there's discussion guides, there's PowerPoint presentations. So there's tons of stuff there for absolutely no cost whatsoever. Also, there is a talk trigger for the book Talk Triggers, which I think makes perfect sense. And it works like this. If you buy a copy of the book, and for whatever reason you don't like it, although I'm fairly certain that you will, but if you don't, it's okay. If you go to the website and you send me a note, it says right there in the back, I will buy you any other book that you want. Any book at all. Any book. You want a first edition Bible, we'll sort that out. We'll happen. So you have literally no risk to not invest in this book. There's absolutely nothing can go wrong economically for you. So TalkTriggers.com is the best place to go for book stuff. My main site for all of our now 4,700 blog posts, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of podcast episodes, webinars, videos, free downloads, training guides, convinceandconvert.com.
Amazing. And seriously, guys, if you have had a key takeaway from this episode, which I know you will, Please do go and buy the book. Seriously, like I say, 15K return in 2 weeks is phenomenal. It's one of the best things that I've done this year, in terms of quick revenue generation. So that speaks for itself. But the second thing is, please go and find Jay on Twitter and let him know what your key takeaway was. Sometimes we can put out these messages into the ether and it can be really hard to, understand what people are getting from it. Right back at the beginning of the episode, Jay talked specifically about talk to your audience, know what they are getting from something, know what their expectations are. So if you want to do him a favor for the amazing information that he shared today, please go and find him on Twitter and let him know what your big takeaway was so that he can use this for some market info as well. Thank you so much.
I would love that. At Baer on Twitter.
Yeah, and he's amazing. He does actually reply sometimes with personal videos, which I was very excited about. So thank you so much. It has been epic.
Thanks. So good to see you.
Anything that you need, please make sure you go download Talk Triggers, buy it. It is available on Amazon Prime, 1-day delivery. Just put it out there. And I will see you guys in the next episode.